if your goals don't scare you, they're not big enough.
So our featured speaker today is the founder of Pericles, a Peoria, Illinois G-Beta startup, which he started as a student at Bradley University to provide voters with quality election information to encourage participation and improve voter confidence. So Jonathan, it's a great pleasure to have you as our featured guest today. Thank you so much for being willing to share your journey with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for the background information you already gave us on Pericles. So just taking it back a step, how did you become interested in the topic of voter engagement and confidence to begin with?
Sure. So in 2016 was my first time I could vote. And then, of course, it's a big presidential race, so I go to vote, and I just know the president race. I didn't really know anything below that. I wasn't really active in politics, but I knew I at least wanted to vote. Went to vote, guessed a lot, and kind of came out of it with, why would I ever do that again? I didn't really do anything to help. Kind of just felt pointless. And so I was kind of just willing to not be an active participant within democracy. And then my roommate at the time was an El Salvadorian immigrant, and he just got his citizenship for the 2018 election. So he was very excited about that. He wanted to participate, and I didn't want to dissuade him because, of course, becoming a full U.S. citizen, that is the biggest perk, is you can take part in democracy. So I decided if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right, and we spent an entire weekend researching everything you could possibly research when it came to the election cycle, in particular the candidates as well. And it took like 20 or 30 sites to be able to get like any semblance of confidence. And the entire time I was looking for, like, there's got to be one platform for all this stuff. There's got to be one platform. Kept on looking. I couldn't find anything. And it just kind of dawned on me of, I'm a computer science major. Why don't I do it?
That's great. I find it so important as an entrepreneur, as someone trying to start companies, that you address a problem that you yourself have faced. And I think you've done exactly that. You're targeting something that you've gone through and been like, this is a bit, ridiculous. I know I can figure out how to solve this. Can you tell us a bit about the story behind the name?
Sure. Pericles of Athens was he wasn't like one of the first, but he was like one of the most recognizable kings or elected leaders of the city of Athens during the time of the Peloponnesian War. He was known for debating Socrates over the merits of democracy or the voice of the people, and really pushing forward the will of the united citizens of Athens. So in terms of being pro-democracy, that was kind of his whole deal. That was his philosophical style, was just being pro-democracy. So when I first made the app, I actually named it Digital Democracy, but it was too many characters, so it ended up getting cut off if it was showing up on the App Store or showed up on someone's phone. So I needed to rename it to something shorter, and I didn't want anything that was like partial to one side or the other. Even a friend of mine said the name Digital Democracy made him think of Democrat too much. So I had to be very neutral going into it as well. So I decided to name it after Pericles because he is the most pro-democracy, small d democracy you could ever be. And he's not like super well known or regarded when it came to like just average people. And so it can lend itself to just being a very unique name that has a lot of hidden meaning within it, if that makes sense.
That definitely makes sense. I have to say, when I saw the owl, I didn't make the connection, but after you explained it, I really like the name quite a bit.
Yep. So the Athenian owl is present on the app. The app logo itself is the Athenian owl.
Okay, yeah. It just took me a little bit to make all the links, but I think it's very clever.
It's just history nerds like me.
I appreciate that, though. I have some big questions for you, but I don't really want to put you in the hot seat. So I just wanted to say that, like, there's really no right or wrong answer here. I'm not holding your feet to the fire. I'm just honestly curious about your views. So,
Of course.
where do you see that, specifically talking about the US, but our political system as a whole, where do you feel like we're really missing the boat inspiring confidence in our election process?
Oh, yes.
And do you think it's going to improve in the near future?
So in terms of missing the boat, there's a lot of studies done. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Global Trends 2040. It was a research paper put out by some of the top intelligence officers within the United States. They typically will put one out every election cycle to kind of predict what the next 20 years will be. So in 2020, they released Global Trends 2040. In 2016, they released Global Trends 2036, stuff like that. And they very much gave a big warning of democracies are backsliding. We need to be careful. We need to start to be present with a lot of this stuff because the signs of authoritarianism are starting to creep up. The signs of general apathy towards the election process are starting to creep up. So we as a people need to be a lot more present in understanding of this stuff. But again, it's just international studies nerds like me who read that stuff. It's not the average person. So you could have a big old warning sign and it won't really matter too much. In terms of what I've noticed or kind of seen, it is an apathy to the process. It's either you see it as entertainment or you're kind of just dissuaded by the process. I think a lot of this stuff is kind of turned into a sports franchise for people. Much in the same way that I identify as a Chicago Bears fan. I will always be a Chicago Bears fan. I will always hate the Packers. You shouldn't really view politics in that way, but it's how a lot of people do it. Of I am a hard Republican. I will always be Republican. I hate Democrats, but that doesn't help us in any regard. And it's not really what politics should be. Yes, it's healthy to have a debate. Yes, it's healthy to have like some loyalty to whatever your cause is. But at the same time, we have to realize that we're all trying to just get this job done together. And I think putting that to the forefront is going to be very important. But in terms of the near future, I don't really see that happening. Mostly because there's so much money being held in the entertainment and spectacle of it. So like the news franchises, like CNN, MSNBC, Fox, the big name stuff, they benefit from a 24 hours news cycle having this as an entertainment factor. So they're going to treat it like pro wrestling. They're going to treat it like football. And in the same way, like you could switch between ESPN and CNN, and they use a lot of the same tactics. So the app, I'm hoping to kind of just look at it more like applying for a job or you're hiring for a position, and then getting down to the local level and into the nitty gritty of it, and just kind of treating it as like this is baseline for your decision making of like here's this information over the individual as opposed to over the party. I see that helping. I'm working towards making that a reality. But right now, I don't really see that happening outside of what I am doing. If not to like self-aggrandize it, but there's not like a lot of causes focusing on that as much as I am trying to focus on it.
I think that's very interesting, and I think that's an important point you make around the media companies and the alignment of motivations. I think motivations and misalignment of motivations is one of the biggest causes of issues in lots and lots of areas of society. And I think it is, as you say, beneficial for the media companies and probably for the parties to be seen as the two competitors, right?
Yes.
It sidelines any smaller parties as well as you said, like produces this loyalty instead of maybe a more reasoned analysis. What I suspect, and I could be totally wrong, what I suspect is that this apathy and entertainment perspective is more common amongst younger voters, particularly the apathy side of things.
Yes.
Do you find that's true? And if so, what do you think are the biggest roadblocks causing that?
Yeah, so the biggest reason why a lot of young people don't vote and why voter participation among, 18 to 30-year-olds is the lowest percentage out of the voting age blocks is general apathy. A lot of them aren't tuning in to see this stuff every day. It's not as much of an entertainment factor to them as it is to the older crowd. So they have a general apathy to it because they're just not really participating. And when asked, like I did a study on this for the Bradley campus and just Central Illinois in the local area of what was your biggest reason for not voting? And the general consensus was, if I went to go vote, I wouldn't know who to vote for. So it's just lack of knowledge. And like, again, I spent an entire weekend doing research on this stuff with a friend, just to be able to feel confident when to go, when going to vote. Most people don't do that. They just, hey, I'm supposed to go vote today. I have an idea of who I'm voting for. Win one race, but I don't know any of the other races. So that feeling of disappointment or feeling of like this is pointless is very common after your first time voting. And so that apathy kind of just stems from like lack of available knowledge. So the app does address that in that everything's in one spot. You don't have that excuse anymore if you have this application. And so I'm hoping to kind of curve that general apathy. It's not just young people. I've had people in their 40s come up to me and talk to me about the app and say, I haven't voted since I was 18, but I feel like I can vote now because of this. And that definitely warms my heart. I definitely think the entertainment factor, as we said before, is more seen in the older crowd. I'm not sure if it's just like sense of loyalty or if it's like a tie to sports loyalty. I keep on seeing a parallel between people who are very loyal to sports teams and people who are very loyal to political parties. So I think it's just the same like entertainment itch that they get. Not entirely sure. Hoping to see that change.
I think that's a great comparison, honestly, coming into Super Bowl weekend in the U.S. too.
Yes.
Because it honestly, political loyalty is just as weird to me too as some sports loyalty. Like, well, it's not just that I hate the Eagles, but I also I hate everyone that they've been friendly with too.
Mhm.
And you're like, wow, that's such a big blanket statement. I'm kind of glad that you're telling me as someone that is younger than me that you feel that the next generation, hopefully Gen Z, is not as beholden to those blind loyalties and hate. I really hope that's true. That we can start seeing beyond that.
I've definitely noticed when it came to younger people in that specific regard of not willing to vote based on hate more than anything else. They're not super loyal to any party. I talked to quite a few politicians. They assume that if like you get young people to vote, they're going to vote Democrat. And I found a lot of young people don't really care for Democrats either, like at all. It's more, show me what you got, I'll vote for you based on that. And in a lot of cases, it's also, what are you doing for me? Or what are you doing for the people that I care about? Like, you have to be very specific on what it is that you want to achieve and show your goals, or else why would I vote for you if you're not going to do what I want you to do?
Right. Yeah. And why would I vote at all? No, well said. I appreciate you sharing that perspective. And building off of what Spencer asked you a little bit, I was wondering, have you been able to measure like what works and what doesn't so far with Pericles? I know you're talking about kind of, who you feel is most suited to use the app, perhaps, who's going to feel most engaged. But do you feel like the data and feedback you've collected so far has shown you anything in particular or shaped your approach?
I focus more on the notification system. A lot of people forget they even have it unless they're notified of its existence, just because it's kind of just there. A lot of people forget the downloads that they have on their phone for the most part. You also don't want to spam them continuously because then that's a fast track to getting it deleted on an application. There's quite a few things that I've added to it. I made this thing very bare bones, and then just like I can add one or two things here or there based off of what people feel will help them moving forward. So there's a tab with every elected office. It'll show you, here's what this position does. Here's like the responsibilities of the office and a how to run section. So during like an off year, I can display like, hey, this election is 8 months out. We are not going to be able to vote in a primary for this in a long time. Here's what this position actually does if you want to do any research. And if you want to run, here are the links or the necessary requirements to run for this position. People really like that. That is a fantastic section. So schools in particular have been very partial to wanting that as like a big feature of, hey, if I'm going to go vote for a county clerk, I better make sure I know what a county clerk does. And what's the difference between a county clerk and a circuit clerk and things like that.
That's very interesting. I think there's so much hidden information in politics just because if you're not a part of it, you don't interact with or know a lot of the closer details.
Mm-hmm. That's especially true when it comes to local stuff. So a county clerk in Illinois can have different responsibilities from a county clerk in Kansas. So it all, like, it has to be changed and adjusted based on your location. And general knowledge is fantastic, but you got to be very specific with this stuff as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a cool idea of being like, if you want to run, this is how you do it. Now, we do have a question from Aaron. How do you ensure that the information provided by Pericles is objective and unbiased? Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, the sample ballot itself and the candidate names is all by the county clerk offices. I've been lucky enough that they're willing to work with me in this project. So the information has to be correct, at least in that regard, simply because it's provided by the county clerks themselves. They're the ones who operate the elections within the state. So if they're getting it wrong, we got a whole bunch of other issues. In terms of being unbiased, I don't write anything. So I'm not editing. They could put any policy they want. It's not up to me to determine what's good or bad policy. I like to use the phrase, if they want to promise everyone in Illinois a puppy, they have every right to promise everyone in Illinois a puppy. It's not up to me to tell you what's good or bad. The one thing I have is they cannot speak for their opponent. And so that's the one tracker I have of putting in people's text, putting it through a system, and having like a flagging system on key phrases. Obviously, I can't read through everything. You could have all the moderators in a row, and something's going to slip through the cracks. The flagging system on the app itself is also very important. But in terms of how to remain unbiased, I think just by providing it as an open platform and not claiming it as like a fact-checking site or like you're never going to see someone put on a stat and that like a little disclaimer at the bottom like this stat's not proven. I don't think I can do that with this. It's something I'd have to really, really dig into and have to be like far, far along the process before we ever get to that point. But right now it's purely, hey, this is what this person is running off of. If they want to provide links and they want to provide like sources cited, they have every right to do so. The one thing that I will check with links is just to make sure it doesn't send them people to like a website that might be a place that they don't want to go or can harm their computer or harm their phone in any type of way or is not safe for work. So in terms of staying unbiased, I think having a hands-off approach for the information is the only way you could really do it. Ballotpedia is pretty good about that as well, but unfortunately they will allow for corrections to be made, and it is a wiki site, so it's not just your campaign who can put stuff on there. On my site, it is purely just, here's from the campaign. I have not written anything for them. That is just their stuff.
I really appreciate that you're trying to preserve that integrity. And I kind of have a question about that integrity, but I just wanted to say, going back to what you were sharing earlier, I agree that making sure we're sharing easy education on the responsibilities of the office, who can run and how they can apply would be really game changing. I am so surprised at my education as a voter has come like very, very far just within the last election cycle. And I'm surprised at how many people, who've been canvassing, really politically active for years, don't understand some of those things and really don't understand who they're voting for. How crucial I know you and I talked about this a little bit, but how crucial the primary election is too.
Extremely.
That if some people lose those races, that could be it. There's no main election.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think being transparent about, and this is a big ask too, being transparent about what it costs to run would also level the playing field. Not even going into all the fundraising that candidates do, but it really is cost prohibitive for some people to run for certain positions, even if they're well qualified. And then there's also this assumption that all political candidates just magically have money or something. So I think showing people the mechanics of that would actually help them plan to run.
So there's a lot of people who run on a whim and they just Google, how do I run for this? And they'll start running without realizing like, oh, here's everything I need to do this effectively in the regards of like, it's a full-time job. If you want to run for public office, very rarely will they have like a baseline like, oh, I'm an accountant at this firm and I'm running for office. It's just, I am running for office. That is the only job you can have because it is a full-time position. So you have to find ways to survive through an entire election cycle based off of like fundraising or your own personal finances. In terms of like showing that cost estimate, that would be interesting to put on the app, but I think it's more just baseline information on like, here's what the paperwork you need to fill out, here's the baseline fee, because it does cost to even run for public office, and here's how many signatures you need in this area,
Yes.
But having that right there makes it feel more real for people. If you ask the average person about running for public office,
Yep.
it's a whim thing, it's something they'll think about. Very rarely is it common knowledge into like what the process actually is to run for public office, who you talk to, the paperwork you fill out, and things of that nature. So I think having that on there is more, you can make that, make it feel more real for people of like, oh, I could run for this. And oh, here's the information I need to run for this. So you might start seeing a wide variety of candidates based off of that. And in terms of like cost, the goal of the app as well is to try to have people who don't have a lot of finances, maybe don't fundraise a lot. Well, they still have an equal shot. They still have an opportunity. Will they have the best opportunity in the world without any fundraising? Probably not. But at least they have a baseline. Like I at least have my voice out here. And if I truly represent the people of this area, they'll vote for me based off of my information on the app.
Yeah, I completely agree that making it feel more accessible to run for office would majorly change things. I'm actually going to pass the ball over to Pavan that has a couple questions for you.
I have this question what's your vision for Pericles and how are you planning to get awareness for your app and how are you planning to scale? So is it you want to raise funds for your app to promote? So that's my question.
Sure. So there's quite a few grants available. I recently just spoke with the State Board of Elections here in Illinois. And so the accessibility of things like the Help America Vote Act, grant funding, partially on the table. It was a lot more complicated than it originally seemed, as most things are within politics. But going through the county clerks kind of helps with that. So from their scalability and getting like the entire state of Illinois and then maybe getting California and all these other states, that's going to come from crowdsourcing most likely, or even corporate partnerships. So similar is an organization called Rock the Vote. The biggest contributor to Rock the Vote, believe it or not, is Levi Jeans. Like, you could find corporations who are willing to put charitable donations in a large sum for a thing they believe in. So being able to preserve democracy and enhance democracy in a lot of cases, I think is something that a lot of people are willing to put their money towards just to see its preservation, or corporations willing to put it there as a show of their support of it. In terms of that as well, I'm hoping to kind of get the attention of Rock the Vote in this next upcoming election cycle and maybe pitching this to them, just because we're on the same mission and this isn't something they provide, but it could be something they provide. Just utilize the thing that's already made and already has a reputation. We can keep on testing and grow from there. So I'm actually working within Generator, talking with Claudius out in DC, who runs the Generator Social Impact cohort, and trying to join that one during the summer and really expand that way.
Okay, thanks, John.
Of course, thank you, Pavan.
That's really cool, John. I mean, Nancy said it as well, but I didn't know Levi cared so much about democracy. That's really awesome.
Yeah, Levi Jeans. Also, Rock the Vote was started by 4 record labels.
Really?
Yeah, so the four biggest record labels in America came together and started Rock the Vote, and of course they got corporate partnerships everywhere as it was, and so they just convinced some of the largest corporations in America to start supporting, and Levi Jeans made the biggest contribution. They still do.
Huh. That's so interesting. Now, if you could accomplish one goal with Pericles in the next 5 years, like a reasonable goal, what would you want that to be?
To be statewide. So as it stands right now, I am in Central Illinois. I operate 5 counties because that is doable with just me as a part-time thing. So I have a full-time job working at a marketing firm. This is my side project. My goal within 5 years is to have this be the job, like my full-time job, and to be across the entire state. And in 5 years, hopefully looking towards other states for that next expansion.
That's awesome. I think that'll be really... I mean, it sounds like a lot of people are really interested in what you've done and have got a lot of benefit from it. So it sounds like that's definitely achievable. Do you have a way of measuring the impact that you've had on voters so far?
Sure. So within the app, I could just track downloads first and foremost to see like, okay, this is definitely getting around. It's definitely word of mouth. It's starting to get close to an election. Suddenly I've got 300 more downloads. How did that happen? Things like that. In terms of being able to tell how effective it was for the people, I think just sending out, and this is something I haven't done yet, but would love to, after an election cycle, send out a notification for a survey asking if they voted, and if they did vote, did they feel confident in it? If no, comment what was halting you from confidence or anything like that. I think going into the future, that would probably be what I would do as a standard on the app, just for my own tracking purposes, and just be able to show those metrics and find any different ideas people might have. Hey, the app was great, but I was missing this one thing that I really would have made the difference. I'm not going to know that unless I have people tell me. So having just a survey put out after the election cycle would probably be the best way to do that.
I think it's a really great idea. And I like that you have such sort of a concrete vision of what you want to achieve. So I told you I kind of had a question for you about like your version of preserving the integrity of this. And so along those lines, like when you're talking, I was thinking like there are other organizations like, Moms Demand Action. There are some others that I've learned about recently that might be interested, operating as nonprofits, but they're very passionate about a particular issue. So how do you feel, like what's your criteria about broadening your reach through those organizations? Because even if they're not giving you money, you could be aligning yourself with, one side of an issue. Like, would you reach out to them and the NRA, for instance? Like, how do you feel about that?
So, like Moms Demanding Action, I probably wouldn't go for, or the NRA, just because they are very pointed. They do not claim to be unbiased. They are biased. They know they're biased. And it's purely for like, oh, we want this one issue to be addressed, or we want this one issue to go this way. And they have every right to do so. I support that completely. But I don't think the app or Pericles should be aligned with that, purely because if I do, it'll halt some candidates from ever putting their information on here, and I need every candidate to put their information on. So a great example of this actually is the League of Women Voters. Here in Illinois, they struggle with getting Republicans to respond to their questions because they're viewed as biased. And you can ask people within the league, they're not really that biased. They definitely have their questions, they definitely have their own personal thing, but within their organization, they're very good about being unbiased. But it's that perception of biases that causes some candidates to not provide the information necessary, and thus they can't fully do their jobs in trying to keep unbiased. So of course they look more biased towards Democrats because the Democrats are the only ones putting their information on. But Republicans have that opportunity. They just choose not to because they're already viewed as biased. So I have to be very careful about perception and who I align myself with due to that perception. So another example would be, Levi Jeans. Levi Jeans doesn't really have a say within politics. Like, no one views Levi Jeans in a way of like, that's definitely a Republican brand or that's definitely a Democrat brand. But if you get, like, say I get key actors, right? I get an actor to be the voice of Pericles and speak on commercials, and well, suddenly I am viewed as biased based off of any previous statement that actor might have made. So I think my aunt at one point said, "Why don't you try to get Chris Evans? He's Captain America. He could be the voice for this." And then I look into Chris Evans' history, and it's like, oh, he's very vocal about one particular side of issues. I cannot do that because then I would be tied to his perception or how people view him.
That's very interesting, and I think I've heard the expression before that in media you have to, if you want to be considered unbiased, you not only have to be unbiased, but you have to be perceived as unbiased. And I feel like you're saying the same thing here.
Yes, perception is very much reality when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah.
Even if it's not the case, even if you do everything I don't think the app has the ability to be biased simply because of the policy of I cannot edit what they say. But if it's perceived as biased, it is. And that's the unfortunate side, because it can cause people to not trust it, or it can trust candidates to not be willing to participate. I need them to participate. So Rock the Vote has done a very good job. People do view Rock the Vote as like left of center, but not too bad. It's just about voter participation. So you might have some people like, well, we don't want Rock the Vote in our general area, but they're not going out of their way to say Rock the Vote is an evil organization like they do for a few other things. CTCL is another example, the Center for Technology and Civic Life. They got a lot of money from Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg put like a couple billion towards them. But because of that, any actions that they take, it is viewed as an extension of Mark Zuckerberg. So if they go to, they actually got sued in Georgia for this. They went to Georgia and helped them with their election equipment and updated a lot of their software. That county in Georgia, that was the year that Georgia flipped to blue for the presidential race. And thus, Republicans viewed it as we lost because CTCL came here and because of Mark Zuckerberg. So it became that perception bias.
Wow, that's so interesting.
So full on, like, election deniers sued CTCL in Georgia, even though they have nothing to do with any of that stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Now, what I do want to ask you a little bit about, just to get more of a perception of you and your sort of operating. This is something that you're doing on the side, right?
As of right now, yes.
How do you manage that? Because I do similar things where I've got my 9 to 5 and I've got a couple of projects that I do on the side. What's your strategy for sort of managing your time, giving what you need to give and what's important to give to your 9 to 5, but also preserving enough energy to spend your time on your own personal projects?
So it definitely helps that I'm a project manager at my marketing firm, because I'm really good with schedules and I'm really good with like who to contact here and how to get projects moving along. So my own personal projects, I kind of just go through the same process that I do for my work projects of, well, here's my chart, here's my tasks, here's who to contact, here's my schedule, stuff like that. So it kind of lends itself to it. I was very lucky for the position that I got at my marketing firm, just because it helped me organize myself a bit better. Yeah, but right now it's in the phase of connections. It's in the phase of making those solid connections, speaking at this stuff, speaking to the media, talking to different grant foundations, or being a part of the G Beta program. I got the technical side of it down. That's already kind of good, so I can dedicate a lot more of my time towards those social and personal connections to help the app further. And that's where being a 9 to 5 and having my task chart of here's who to contact, make sure to contact them, CC this person, any background information, and just doing research. It's hard to juggle sometimes. There's definitely days where burnout is very real, but knowing that it's all kind of worth it at the end justifies it. But yeah, my position at my regular job, I think it was the most beneficial I could ever had when it came to managing my time.
I'm so glad to hear that. That does sound like a good balance. I know it's still challenging, but it sounds like your passion has carried you forward. So I have a future question for you. If you could, bring your abilities and your passion to a different sort of project, in the future at some point, do you have an idea of another problem you'd like to tackle?
Ooh. That's a good one. I haven't really thought about that. I've been so focused on this. I would definitely want to approach international relations more. So my major at Bradley was computer science, but my minor was international relations, and it's definitely something I had passion for was politics at a macro level. So I think sharing of technology and different advancements we're having in communication that we've never really had as a people before should be a big focus in our politics right now, bigger than what it is. And not just politics, but just us as a society, us as a people, like not Americans, not Australians, just people in general. Thomas Friedman is a really good author on this regard, and I've studied his work quite often. He spoke about the flattening of the world because of technology. It's all becoming an equal playing field because suddenly, like, there's a marketing firm in Peoria, Illinois. You can go to a marketing firm in Portugal, and it's still the same effect. Like it's all equaling out to each other. Proximity to each other doesn't matter as much because of the internet and because of our ability to communicate over such vast distances in such a short amount of time. And that's very new for us as a people. Like even up to the 90s, that wasn't really much of an option. So I think I would want to focus more on think tanks and just general proximity to what do we need to be prepared for? What can we do to make sure that this effect is the most positive it can be? And how do we mitigate the risk? It's something I would want to focus a lot more of my time on.
That's very interesting. And I do feel like this is something that this sort of mentality and mindset you've brought to it brought to Pericles, you could bring a lot of good with that focus as well. Could I ask, are there any decisions or any points you've had with Pericles so far that you've had to pivot, or you feel like, maybe that was not the best choice and you had to change from there? How did you manage that?
Very early on, yes. So I am a non-for-profit. I was not originally. I was an LLC when I first started. And the idea originally was to have candidates pay to be put on it. And then it was through like a lot of talking with different organizations. I believe it was the NAACP in the local area who was very adamant about you should not charge people, you should not charge candidates. This needs to be free. And that very much pivoted me away from trying to find a revenue model within that because they were worried about like a pay to play. Like if you pay a certain amount of money, you get more benefits for being on here. And they went against the entire idea of being unbiased. So if they're paying to get their own benefit, well, then it's no longer an unbiased source. So that was definitely like my reinforcement into like how to be unbiased and what I need to do to keep that unbiased streak wasn't originally there. It definitely got taught to me just from exposure and talking to people about it. And then other pivots, there was a point where I thought about selling data information to people based on the app. So one of the features of the app is you could select your preferred candidates. So when you see like your list of your sample ballot, it'll have everything listed out for you of what you've already pre-selected. So that way you don't have to, like, there's no memorization. That is a concern as well. It's like, oh, all this information's here. What if they forget the name or they mix up the name? So I have like a preset on there to where it saves to your account what your pre-selected candidates are, your preferred candidates. And unfortunately, it was a concept that got floated to me by a businessman in the local area of why don't I just sell that information? So that way you can know who's going to win before they win. So selling that polling information, it could be beneficial to a lot of fundraisers. It could be beneficial to a lot of corporations that might want to help select candidates. Well, if they know who's going to win, they know who to back. They know how to back the right horse in a sense. That got a lot closer to being a reality than what I'm comfortable with. Even thinking about it now. It got to a point where I got on a phone call with Tucker Carlson of Fox News for it because he really liked the idea. So I've definitely found myself in strange situations talking to people about this stuff, and keeping that non-biased streak was definitely a pivot for me. I always knew we needed to do something to benefit democracy. We need to do this, we need to do that. But my own selfishness definitely led me down like a dark path for a little bit there when first starting out with the app.
I know. I found that story like so pivotal for me too. Like, just in understanding your integrity, because you said I would feel the same way if it was Rachel Maddow, and I really respect that. because to me, that shows me that you're doing this for a much, much deeper reason. It's, I completely like the video you have in, the article, and, you will become the face for this in a way, but, at the same time, I think, maintaining the deeper reason why you're doing this, really being true to that why and those values. I think that's what has a chance at making this catchy, if you will. Eventually, all those people that don't trust, they see that other people do trust you. I know that's a little bit of a dose of obnoxious optimism, but
Yeah, I definitely need the optimism in my life, so thank you very much.
all right. Well, let me know if you need more of it. But I really have seen that there are some people that are have been burned a lot, and they're not willing to trust people. But if you keep kind of showing that you're not that you really are there for the reasons that you say you are, I think that's meaningful, especially in the US, where we really do sue each other all the time.
If there's a way to make money, we're gonna find it. That is the American will.
Yes, apparently. So we have a question from Aaron that I think I'm just gonna read aloud. He and I are having a little bit of a conversation back and forth in this, and this is not a question you have to know the answer to. Honestly, this is a good question for all of us to think about. But how do you know when your project has taken off to a point, where you need to or you should quit your day job? How do you decide, when the right time is? I don't know if this is something you've thought about for yourself, but if you have, I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say.
Oh no, it's definitely been a daydream of mine of when can I do this fully, because that is the goal. That is the laying down at night. What am I dreaming about? Just doing this. This would be my perfect job. In terms of when do I know when I'm there? You do live in that perpetual fear of like jumping the gun, of like having that trust of like I can live off this. I'm good. I got everything in order. And then you get there, and then that's not the case, and your standard of living has to drop severely because of it. So I think I'm not really sure when it's going to be. I think I really just have to take the plunge with a certain amount. Right now, the app doesn't make anything. So if I get like a partnership, and I can start hiring people, like if I could support someone else's well-being, then I know I could support my own. I think it might be the line. If I'm willing to hire people on like a full-time basis, then I can hire myself. That'd be the best way to look at it.
I think that's a good measure. I think it's something that a lot of people have thought about and not had totally known what the right answer is. But I think it's a very, very interesting question about when is the time that your side business can become your main business,
Yeah, that's the goal at the end of the day, ain't it?
That's the goal, exactly. Now, Danilo has a question. Danilo, do you have audio? Are you comfortable asking a question, or do you want me to read it out?
Hello. My question is in regards to the generative AI, and particularly about what GPT-3 is showing. I wanted to get your opinion about how is that going to affect the politics, particularly about the labor market, how people is going to feel like their job is at risk and willing to vote for a certain party that is against this. Or maybe even considering that this generative AI could be a source for misinformation. We don't know. And particularly now that we don't have a regulation for that. So I wanted to get your thoughts about that.
That is a very, very interesting topic, just because I've done studies on this. So again, my major was computer information systems, my minor is international relations. I did entire independent studies. I used to teach classes over this particular subject of what do we need to be prepared for with new technology and people's ability to spread misinformation in regards to that. So one of the most fascinating videos you could find, I'm sure you could find it, is Keegan Mike and Key, the guy from Key and Peele, he does Us, and he did Nope, and I'm blanking on it. Get Out, like those horror movies. He does a very good impression of Barack Obama. He doesn't look too much like him, but he sounds very much like him. And they used deep fake like facial scanning and AI like placement of facial features to make him look identical to Barack Obama. He did like an address to the nation with just ridiculous statements, all to show you could spread misinformation super easily. And now there's even stuff for AI voice masking. Like we can generate people's voices based off of key phrases that they've said before, or there's a record of them saying. So the idea that this stuff is going to be spread, AI art as well as being used for propaganda, I'm starting to see that pop up for like a lot of the protests out in Europe or the Ukrainian and Russian war, is these AI generated images to make it appear a certain way when in reality it's not. The misinformation with technology is going to be severe. I'm super curious to see what we can do to regulate it, but it's a hard one to regulate. When people know the technology exists, they're going to find a way to use it. That in terms of needing optimism, we might need some there, Nancy. It's not going to be a great. It's going to be tough. I'll be honest. I don't really see any clean solutions we could have for it. It's a fascinating thing to think that we even got to this point with technology. But now it's like, how do you stop it? Sorry if that brought down the room there.
No, not at all. I really appreciate you addressing the question and addressing the realities of this question. You see online so much people being like, these AIs are going to take everyone's jobs, or they're going to, make us all billionaires and none of us will ever have to work again, and all the different insane perspectives. But I think the reality is there are some good implications and some very, very dark implications.
Just a quick question to the room. Has anyone here read Dune? By Frank Herbert? The only reason I bring that up is because it takes place like 10,000 years from now. 5,000 years before it took place, there was something called the Butlerian Jihad, where it was a war between AI, like artificial intelligent robots, versus humans. And because of that war, humans now have like the strict religious law of you cannot make artificial intelligence because of that, because they had a full war against it. And so that's what made them like go as far as they did with the use of spice and everything else like that. It's fantastic world building on a book, but it brings up that fundamental thing of like, will that eventually become our culture? Will we eventually create like, and this is far, far in the future, eventually create like religious doctrine to stop us from ever doing this kind of stuff again? It's a fascinating thing to think about.
That is a very interesting thing. I've heard very good things about the Dune book, but I've never actually read it myself.
Fantastic read. Frank Herbert's real trippy though, so you got to be careful with it.
Fair enough. I do think even now we're starting to get to the point where with house assistants and AI and everything, where technology is getting more and more similar to magic, where it's like you effectively have this, like if you have all the lights set up in your house, you effectively have this magic command to turn all the lights on in your house. And I feel like we're taking the first baby steps to the point where technology, especially this AI sort of technology, is becoming, in a very real sense, mythological.
Oh yeah.
I think that's going to be interesting. I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but I think it's going to be a hell of a ride.
My professor at Bradley used to always say you could tell a tech enthusiast from a tech expert very easily. A tech enthusiast will have a smart home, smart watch, automatic start on their phone for their car, everything in that regard. But a tech expert will have a deadbolt and a shotgun, and that's it.
Yeah, I've heard that before. Someone said something very similar. As a tech expert, the most advanced thing they have in their house is a printer and a gun next to it just in case it starts making any weird noises.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's that idea of if you actually know what this stuff is, you're very cautious about it.
Now, we do have one question that we like to ask at the end of our hour, Although I did just notice we're literally in the last minute. Do you mind if we take just a little bit more time to ask one more question?
Yeah, absolutely.
So our last question that we always like to finish with is a words of wisdom question. The basic idea is you interpret it how sort of makes the most sense to you. What are some words of wisdom or philosophy or whatever that has been shared to you or that you've come up with that you'd like to leave us with?
That's a very deep one. It might go even further from the app, but just your goals in general. I've always liked the quote, if your goals don't scare you, they're not big enough. This stuff is extremely scary. Getting a random email from Nancy saying, hey, I'm out in California, I heard about your app. That was scary to me. Of like, did this thing spread too far before it's ready? Am I not ready for this kind of stuff? Am I going to be able to keep up with these people? And that's good. You need to be scared whenever you're doing this stuff. Make sure that you get that excitement in your life by your own goals and by what it is that you hope to see get done. Always try to be positive. Take the Peter Parker route of with great power comes great responsibility. If you have the ability to help, go and help. And that's the foundation for a lot of my perception, a lot of my own morals is that idea of I have the opportunity to help people, then it is upon me to help. And because of that, it needs to scale, it needs to grow, it needs to be big enough to help all.
I love it. And I love that you quoted Peter Parker. And I'm sorry I accessed your anxiety by the way I reached out to you.
Oh, yeah, that's a good thing. You need to have that, you need to feel that tingle in your toes every now and again. And sorry, it's not Peter Parker. It was by Ben Parker, but Peter Parker says it all the time.
Right. That's a good point. That's right. It's the deceased uncle.
Yep, Uncle Ben.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. We really appreciate everything you've shared with us today and taught us, frankly. And thank you for everyone that joined us today. We really appreciate you making time, bringing your perspective and energy to the discussion today. Spencer and I and the team behind Founders Voyage feel really fortunate to be part of this community with you and for the opportunity to have had to bring you cooperative learning experiences like this one for the last 2 years. So we'd love to hear your nominations for other community members that you think we should bring into the fold, as well as for future Saturday guests and session ideas. And John, we definitely want to keep the line of communication going too. So as you need support, please do let us know. The beauty of a worldwide network is that we do have some really great people. So if you're thinking about wanting to explore what it would be like to put this somewhere else and you want to have a conversation with someone in Guatemala, we could probably hook you up. So just let us know. But
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'll make sure to take part. Thank you.
yeah, thanks everyone. And we hope that you have a great day and evening ahead.
Have a great time.
Thank you very much, John. Have a lovely day, everyone.
Take care.
This has been Nancy and Spencer on Founders Voyage Weekly Podcast. Our speaker each week can be reached through our Discord server. Our intro and outro music is from the song Something for Nothing by Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band. We'll be back again next week for another episode. Until then, have a great day and continue your voyage.